It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday afternoon. The sun blazed high above a quiet cul-de-sac, its heat softened only by the glistening blue of my backyard pool. I had worked hard for this home, a gated property tucked behind a private fence, my little sanctuary away from nosy neighbors and uninvited guests. But peace never lasts long when Karen lives next door. Karen had always been the type to believe every square foot of the neighborhood somehow fell under her personal jurisdiction. The HOA had elected her president 3 years ago, and she'd been on a self-appointed crusade ever since, handing out warnings for trash cans placed an inch too far from the curb, barking about lawn heights, even measuring paint shades to ensure they fit her community aesthetic. But this time, she crossed a line I never expected. I had just stepped out to skim the pool when I noticed movement near the gate. At first, I thought it was a delivery man dropping off a package. But no, there she was. Karen. She wasn't just peeking over the fence, as she'd done countless times before. She had somehow made her way inside the gate, sunglasses perched high on her head, arms crossed like she owned the place. And to my shock, she had a group of neighborhood kids with her. Without so much as a knock, she marched toward the pool deck as if she were conducting a personal tour. Her voice carried loud enough for the whole block to hear. She was telling the kids they could come swim any time, claiming the pool was a community feature. A community feature? This was my property, paid for, fenced in, and clearly marked with private signs. Yet here she was, treating it like her own clubhouse. I stood frozen, watching as the kids ran toward the water, laughing, splashing, tossing pool toys Karen had apparently brought herself. The audacity left me speechless. When I finally approached to demand what she thought she was doing, she barely flinched. She waved her hand dismissively and told me that, as HOA president, she had authority to make neighborhood decisions. According to her, my pool should be open for community use. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Surely, she couldn't believe she had the right to let strangers onto my property. But Karen never misunderstood anything. She believed it, fully, and she wasn't about to leave without making her point. Later that day, as I drained and refilled the pool to clean out the sunscreen and debris left behind, I noticed the gate latch had been tampered with. It wasn't just open, it was broken. Someone had pried it loose to let themselves in. My stomach turned cold. This wasn't an accident. The next morning, I woke to the sound of splashing again. Somehow, Karen and her entourage had returned, this time with coolers, towels, and lawn chairs. She acted as though I didn't even exist, laughing with other neighbors as if my backyard were a public park. When I confronted her again, she told me she had already discussed it with HOA members and decided it was best for everyone if my pool became shared property. My anger boiled over, but before I could force them out, Karen played her trump card. She called the police. Standing there in my own backyard, I listened in disbelief as she told the responding officer I was blocking neighborhood kids from using the pool. She claimed the HOA had authority over every home in the community, including mine. The officer seemed unsure at first, asking me for proof that this was a private residence, not part of any shared facility. My hands shook with frustration as I scrambled to show property deeds, photos, and gate records. Karen smirked the entire time, as though she had already won. And when the officer finally sided with me, warning her to leave, her smile didn't fade. She whispered something about how this isn't over, before stomping out the gate with her flip-flops slapping against the pavement. But I knew she meant it. Karen didn't take no for an answer that night. As I locked the gate and turned on security cameras, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Karen had embarrassed herself in front of the police. And Karen never lets go of a grudge. She was going to come back harder, louder, and even more determined to prove she had control. And I was ready for her. Karen never wasted time when it came to stirring trouble. By Monday morning, she had already called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but word traveled fast through the neighborhood. Several residents texted me to say Karen was telling everyone I was selfishly hoarding community amenities and refusing to cooperate with neighborhood rules. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Karen thrived on manipulation. She could twist any situation into her favor, painting herself as a selfless leader fighting for what's best for everyone. I knew her plan. If she couldn't control my property by force, she'd use the HOA to make my life miserable until I gave in. Sure enough, the harassment started almost immediately. I received letters claiming I was in violation of HOA guidelines, ridiculous complaints about everything from the color of my shutters to the position of my mailbox. A citation even arrived accusing me of improper fencing, even though my gate had been approved years ago. The message was clear: comply or be buried under penalties. I refused to budge. This was my property, bought outright and clearly listed as exempt from HOA common use areas. I paid the minimal association fees for road upkeep and security, but my home itself was not subject to the kind of control Karen claimed. I thought this would be an easy fight to win, but I underestimated her persistence. A week later, I came home to find a group of kids climbing over my gate again. Karen stood nearby on the sidewalk, watching like a hawk, but pretending to mind her own business. When I demanded the kids leave, she filmed me on her phone, shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear that I was threatening children. Within hours, a clip of me yelling, stripped of any context, was circulating in the community group chat. By evening, I had become the villain of my own neighborhood. People I barely knew were posting angry messages online about how I was selfish, unneighborly, and not a team player. Karen didn't stop there. She sent a formal HOA notice claiming she was reassigning my pool as a shared resource under her management. It was outrageous and completely illegal, but it was enough to confuse several neighbors who didn't know the difference between private and community property. Then came the second police visit. This time, Karen told the responding officer I was endangering children by keeping an unsafe pool. She claimed I had refused to install proper safety measures and demanded they inspect my property. Even though I had locks, cameras, and up-to-code fencing, Karen spun it as though I were running some kind of public hazard. Thankfully, the officer left after reviewing my paperwork, but his warning was unsettling. This looks like an HOA issue. You might want to get legal advice. That night, I sat in the dim glow of my kitchen light, staring at a growing stack of threatening letters and violation notices. This wasn't about the pool anymore. This was about power. Karen wanted to prove she could bend anyone to her will, even someone who technically wasn't under her authority. The next morning, I installed new locks, reinforced the gate, and upgraded my cameras to record every corner of the property. I thought I was a step ahead. But then, something happened that made my blood run cold. I woke up to find the gate wide open. No damage. No signs of forced entry. Just swinging on its hinges, as though someone with a key had let themselves in. The pool deck was littered with footprints and snack wrappers. Karen had escalated from harassment to trespassing, and if she had managed to get a copy of my gate key, it meant she wasn't working alone. Someone inside the neighborhood, maybe even on the HOA board, was helping her. I realized this was no longer a petty dispute. Karen wasn't just trying to annoy me. She was trying to break me, and I decided I wasn't going to fight her alone. I knew Karen wouldn't stop unless someone forced her to. The stack of HOA violation letters was now inches thick, each one more ridiculous than the last. She had weaponized the association against me, trying to exhaust me into surrender. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had hired a property attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases. The first thing he did was confirm what I already knew. My property deed clearly showed my home was outside the HOA's jurisdiction when it came to shared facilities. My pool was private, period. Karen had no legal authority to reassign it or open it to the neighborhood, but Karen didn't care about facts. When my lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter, she called an emergency HOA meeting and tried to vote me into compliance. The move backfired spectacularly. The board's own bylaws confirmed they couldn't alter property rights without a unanimous vote from every homeowner, and I obviously refused. Still, Karen pressed on. She filed a false safety complaint with the city, claiming my pool lacked proper fencing. Inspectors showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand, only to leave shaking their heads when they saw everything was fully up to code. I thought that might finally slow her down. It didn't. 2 nights later, I caught her on camera again. This time, she wasn't just loitering. She was walking around my backyard at midnight, flashlight in hand, taking photos as if she were building a case against me. My lawyer didn't just see this as harassment. He saw it as criminal trespassing. We called the police, filed a formal report, and turned over the footage. The next morning, an officer knocked on Karen's door with a warning that if she set foot on my property again, she would be arrested. For the first time, the look on her face wasn't smug. It was fear. The HOA board, tired of her antics, finally turned on her. Members were fed up with the legal bills she was racking up and the unwanted attention she brought to the neighborhood. In a heated vote, Karen was removed as president. She screamed that it was all a conspiracy, but the decision stood. Within days, the violation letter stopped. The harassment ended, and Karen disappeared behind her blinds, avoiding eye contact every time I drove past. The final blow came when my lawyer demanded reimbursement for the damage to my gate and the cost of refilling the pool after her unauthorized pool parties. Faced with undeniable evidence and no support left in the neighborhood, Karen had no choice but to pay. The first quiet weekend in months felt surreal. No shouting, no trespassers, no letters taped to my door. I floated in my own pool, the water calm and perfectly still, knowing I had fought back and won. Karen had thought she owned my pool. She thought she could bully me into submission with titles and threats. But all she really did was prove how far some people will go when they're given a little power, and how quickly that power crumbles when someone stands up to them. In the end, it wasn't just about keeping strangers out of my backyard. It was about protecting my right to say no. My pool, my property, my rules. And Karen? She learned that lesson the hard way.